I remembered the first time I drove into Bridgetown. It was early morning, and the sky looked like it hadn't made up its mind yet, caught somewhere between night and dawn. The air smelled like wet pine, and the roads were empty, except for a few flickering streetlights that hummed like tired old memories. I had been driving all night from Denver. My car dashboard glowed a dull orange, and the radio crackled between stations, picking up nothing but static and old country songs. It was strange, every signal just disappeared the closer I got to town. No internet, no phone service, not even a proper GPS reading. The last thing my phone said before it died was, "Entering Bridgetown County." The place looked harmless enough. Small houses, wide porches, rusty mailboxes, and a diner called Maggie's Morning. The kind of town where time usually slows down, but here it felt like time was trying to run away. I pulled up outside a motel, till one of those old roadside ones with buzzing neon lights that read vacancy. Inside, an old man sat behind the counter. He wore a navy cap that said U.S. Mail, even though the Postal Service logo was long faded. His face was wrinkled in that kind of way that made you think he'd spent his life outdoors, talking to the wind more than two people. "Room 401?" he asked, voice soft but sharp, like he hadn't spoken in a while. "Yeah," I said, "just for a few days. I'm here to do a story about the town." He stared at me for a second too long, then nodded. "Story, huh? We don't get many of those anymore." He handed me an old-fashioned key knot, a key card, an actual metal key with a tag that said Room 3. His hands trembled a little, but there was something odd in his eyes. Not fear exactly, but familiarity. It's like he'd seen me before. I thanked him and went to my room. The place was quiet. Too quiet. The wallpaper peeled off like dry skin, and the air conditioner made a low, groaning sound. I put my bag down, sat on the bed, and tried to check my notes, but my phone was completely blank. Every file, every picture, every contact gone. It was like someone had hit erase all. I remember laughing nervously, thinking it was just a glitch. But then I noticed something. The bedside table had an envelope on it. No name, just a neatly folded piece of paper with handwriting so elegant it looked like it belonged to another century. I opened it. It read, "If you're reading this, means you've made it past the fog. Don't trust what you remember. Don't stay after the third sunrise. E.C.E." See, those initials didn't mean anything to me then, but later I would learn that they belonged to Elliot Crane, the town's old mailman. It's the same man who, according to local records, had been dead for 10 years. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard things, soft whispers, the sound of doors opening and closing somewhere in the distance. Footsteps on gravel that stopped just outside my window. I looked outside once, around 2:30 a.m., and I swear I saw someone standing across the street, just a shadow, still as stone, watching. The next morning, I went to the diner. Maggie's Morning smelled like bacon grease and old coffee, but it was alive, the only place in town with any real energy. A waitress in her 40s with curly blonde hair smiled when she saw me. "New face," she said. "Passing through or staying a while?" "Just a few days," I said. "I'm writing about the town. Bridgetown, right?" She froze for a second. Her smile didn't fade, but her eyes did. "Bridgetown, that's what we call it." "Yeah." She poured me coffee, and for a moment, I thought I saw her hand shake. "So, what's the story about?" "Okay." I told her the truth, or at least part of it. "I heard something strange happens here. People forget things. It's like entire days." Her eyes darted to a man sitting in the corner. He was reading a newspaper, but the paper was completely blank. It's not even a headline. "No one forgets anything here," she said quickly. "You should finish your breakfast and leave before the fog comes in again." Before I could ask what she meant, she walked away. I looked out the window. Okay, the fog she mentioned it was already starting to roll in. Big, white, and slow, like it had a purpose. I left money on the counter and stepped outside, and that's when I noticed something wrong. Every car parked along the street had frost on the windshield. Even though it was late summer, as I walked down Main Street, I started to see the town more clearly. There was a post office small, abandoned looking, but the door was open. Inside were dozens of mail bags, neatly stacked, untouched for years. Dust covered everything except the letters. The letters were spotless, clean, like someone had just delivered them yesterday. I picked one up. The envelope was addressed to the people of Bridgetown for tomorrow. The handwriting was the same as the note in my motel room. ECI opened it carefully. Inside was a single sheet of yellowed paper. Greater than you won't remember this. None of you ever do. The loop begins again at dawn. Please keep believing that you are real. That's the only way we stay human. Elliot craned. My hands went cold. I looked around the post office. The floor was lined with hundreds of similar letters, law dated for the next day. Every one of them written by the same man, Elliot Crane. I stepped outside, and the world felt different. The fog had thickened, and the town's colors had drained away, like someone had turned down the saturation knob of reality. Few people walked by, smiling, greeting each other politely, but their eyes looked blank, like they were on autopilot. A little girl waved at me. She was holding a red balloon. "Did you get your letter yet?" she asked. I knelt down. "What letter?" "The one that tells you who you are," she said softly. "Everyone gets one before bedtime." I didn't know what to say. She smiled, turned, and walked away into the fog. Later that day, I went back to the motel to ask the old man some questions, but he wasn't there. The front desk was empty, except for a single envelope resting on the counter. It was addressed to me, "Greater than you've met them. You've seen the letters. Please leave before sunset. Once the loop resets, you'll forget this too." Elliot Crane. I felt my heart race. I grabbed my camera to take pictures of the letter. The fog, the streets, but every photo came out blank, just empty gray. That's when I realized something terrifying. No matter what I saw or recorded, this town erased it. As the sun went down, the streetlights flickered on, and I noticed everyone quietly leaving the streets, like an unspoken rule. Doors locked, curtains drawn. The only sound left was the wind whispering through the trees. I went back to my room and found something. Hadn't left their photograph on the nightstand. In the photo, I was standing next to the old man from the motel. Behind us was a mail truck with the words Bridgetown Postal Service. The date at the bottom said June 17th, 1984. But that couldn't be right. I wasn't even born in 1984. And yet, there I was, smiling, holding a letter in my hand. The same letter that now lay on the table beside me. The photograph wouldn't stop haunting me. I must have stared at it for hours, trying to convince myself it was fake, that maybe someone had edited it, slipped it into my room as some kind of sick joke. But deep down, I knew what I saw wasn't a trick. The picture had that old, grainy warmth that no modern camera could fake. And that smile on my face, it looked too real, too unaware. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I kept seeing the same thing. That fog rolling down the street like a living thing, swallowing the town whole. The silence between the gusts of wind felt alive, whispering something I couldn't quite understand. I wanted to leave, but something inside me said if I did, I'd never get answers. I'd just become another outsider who forgot everything once they crossed the town line. By morning, the fog had lifted. The air was crisp, unnaturally clean, and the sunlight looked like it was filtered through old glass. I stepped outside, and everything seemed fine. People were sweeping porches, hanging laundry, walking dogs. Normal life. But there was something in their rhythm, like they were following an invisible script. I walked down to the town library, thinking maybe I could find anything about this place. The building was old, covered in vines, and the sign above the door was so faded, it just read, "Be Ij Own." Inside, the air smelled like damp paper and dust. The librarian was a woman in her late 50s, thin glasses perched on the edge of her nose, hair tied in a tight bun. She looked up as I entered. "Good morning," she said, her voice gentle, like a teacher's. "You're new here, aren't you?" I nodded. "Yeah, just visiting. I'm a journalist. I wanted to learn more about the town, maybe the history, the old records." Her eyes flickered for a moment, just like the waitresses had the day before. "Records. We don't really keep much of those anymore. Things get misplaced." I forced a smile. "I get it. Small town, small budget." She smiled back, but it didn't reach her eyes. Still, she motioned me toward a back room lined with old boxes. "If there's anything left, it'd be there. Just don't be too disappointed if it's empty." The boxes were coated in dust. Some had labels, 1982, 1985, 1989, but the handwriting was faint. I opened the one marked 1984. Inside were yellowed newspapers, few photographs, and stacks of unopened letters. The letters had the same looping cursive as before, Elliot Crane. I pulled out a newspaper. The front page headline read, "Local mailman honored for 40 years of service." The photo showed the same old man from the Motel Elliot, Crane standing next to a mail truck. But below that article was something odd. A smaller piece, half-torn, "Experiment temporarily suspended. Government scientists leave site near Bridgetown." No details, no author. Just that single line. I was about to dig deeper when the librarian appeared behind me, silent as a shadow. "Find something interesting?" she asked. I jumped. "Jesus, you scared me." She smiled faintly. "Sorry, old floors, quiet shoes." I held up the newspaper. "Do you remember this guy? Elliot Crane." Her face went still. After a moment, she said softly, "Everyone remembers him, or at least they think they do." "What does that mean?" She took a deep breath. "There are stories in this town about time, memory, and the fog. About how we wake up every morning and don't quite know who we were yesterday, but there's always a letter waiting, something to remind us who we should be." I stared at her. "So you're saying these letters? They tell people their lives?" She nodded. "Some say Elliot wrote them before he died. Others think he never died at all. Do you believe that?" Her eyes darted toward the window. The light outside had turned dull, even though it was barely noon. "Belief doesn't matter here. What matters is what you choose to remember." "K." With that, she walked away. I spent hours reading through those papers. Most of the town records stopped around 1984. No births, no deaths, no news after that. Just the same recycled headlines printed again and again under different dates. It was like the town had been frozen in time, endlessly repeating itself. Around sunset, I left the library. The streets were empty again, just like the night before. The same quiet dread settled in. I passed by the diner, lights off. The post office door closed. Only one building had a faint glow inside the church. I don't know what made me go in. Maybe curiosity, maybe fear. Inside, rows of wooden pews stretched into darkness. At the front, candles flickered beneath a cracked stained glass window. And there, standing by the altar, was someone I didn't expect to see. It was the old man from the motel. He looked exactly the same. Same hat, same eyes, same trembling hands. "Elliot," I said, voice shaking. You're alive." He turned slowly. His eyes were clear, sad. "Alive," he said quietly, "isn't the right word." I stepped closer. "What's happening in this town? Why can't people remember? Why do you keep writing letters?" He didn't answer right away. He walked toward a pew, sat down, and motioned for me to do the same. When he finally spoke, His voice was low, heavy with years of secrets. Once, a long time ago, Bridgetown was part of something called Project Meridian. The government built a facility nearby researching quantum memory retention. They wanted to find a way to store human consciousness, preserve it through time, like letters in a bottle. I frowned. You're saying they were experimenting on people, on volunteers, he corrected, mostly locals. They thought they were helping build something beautiful, but it went wrong. Something about the magnetic field here, the fog, the arid, trapped us. We stopped moving forward. My mind was racing. You mean you're all stuck in a loop? He nodded. Every night, the world resets. Memories fade, but I remember. Someone has to. That's why I write. I could barely breathe. But how are you still here if you died 10 years ago? He smiled weakly. Maybe I did. Maybe I didn't. Maybe I'm just a memory that refuses to let go. The candlelight flickered across his face, and for a second, I saw something impossible. His outline shimmered, like heat waves rising from the pavement. And then it was gone. You need to leave, he said, before the fog comes back. I can't, I said. I need to understand this. Kay leaned closer. Understanding comes at a price. When the loop resets, you won't remember any of this. You'll wake up, just like the rest, thinking it's your first day in Bridgetown. I shook my head. There has to be a way to stop it. Okay. He looked away. There is, but it's not something you'll want to do. Before I could ask what he meant, the church doors slammed open. A rush of wind blew out the candles. The fog poured in like a living tide. And when I turned, Elliot was gone. The air grew colder. My phone buzzed once, flashing a single message before shutting off again. It was from an unknown number. The message read, "You have until sunrise." I stumbled outside, heart pounding. The streets were swallowed in fog. The buildings looked different, older, warped, as if the town was shifting between versions of itself. I could hear faint voices echoing, fragments of conversation repeating over and over. A man shouting, "Good morning," a woman asking the time, a child laughing, all blending together in a haunting loop. I ran toward the motel, hoping to grab my car keys, but when I reached the parking lot, my car was gone. In its place stood an old, rusted pickup truck, half buried in weeds, with a license plate from 1983. The fog was thicker now, almost solid. I could barely see a few feet ahead. And then, out of nowhere, I saw Hurt, the little girl with the red balloon. She stood in the middle of the road, staring straight at me. "You didn't leave," she said softly. "Now you'll forget, too." I reached out. "Wait, what do you mean? Who are you?" She smiled sadly. "Tomorrow, you'll be someone else. But that's okay. Elliot will write you a letter." The balloon slipped from her hand and drifted upward, disappearing into the mist. When I looked down again, she was gone. Only the echo of her voice remained, fading into the wind. That night, as I felt the fog close in around me, I heard one last sound, the faint rustle of paper, like hundreds of letters being opened at once. And then, everything went dark. When I opened my eyes, sunlight was streaming through thin motel curtains. For a few seconds, everything felt normal to normal, the kind of calm that hides something wrong underneath. The air smelled of coffee and detergent. Birds were chirping outside. I could hear a lawnmower somewhere down the street. But my chest felt tight, as if my lungs were remembering fear my mind couldn't reach. I sat up. The room looked different. The wallpaper wasn't peeling anymore. The air conditioner, once broken and groaning, was silent but cleaned. The bedside table was polished, and there, resting on it, was an envelope, white, crisp, perfectly new. My name was written on it in Lupin cursive. I didn't touch it right away. My hands trembled. I kept staring at it, half expecting the world to crumble if I picked it up. Finally, tore it open. Greater than good morning. Welcome to Bridgetown. You're here to write a story about us. We're glad you arrived safely. E.C. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. E. Ciliad Crane. The letters had started again. I stumbled to the mirror. My reflection looked wrong. Not younger, not older, just slightly out of focus, like the edges of my face were fighting to stay still. I blinked, and for an instant, saw another reflection overlapping me and a man in a postal uniform. Eyes sad, mouth whispering something I couldn't hear. I splashed water on my face. The vision vanished. I grabbed my phone. It powered on perfectly. Battery full, files intact. No proof of what happened last night. No fog, no church, no girl with the red balloon. Just the same email draft I'd written before I came here. The same total list reminding me to research local legends. Maybe it had all been a dream, but when I stepped outside, I froze. The same waitress from the diner walked past me, smiling as if she'd never seen me before. Morning. You new in town? My throat went dry. Yeah, just got here. She nodded. The same words, the same tone. Welcome to Bridgetown. This was happening again. I tried to play along. Thanks. Where can I get some breakfast? Maggie's morning, she said, pointing down the street, the exact same gesture, the exact same smile. Tell Maggie I sent you. The world shimmered slightly, like heat waves on asphalt, and then stabilized. I looked around and realized everything was positioned the same way it had been yesterday, the first day. The same red truck parked at the corner. The same dog sleeping by the hardware store. Only one thing was different. Across the street, on a telephone pole, someone had nailed a photograph. It was the same photo from my room, the one of me and Elliot in front of the mail truck, dated 1984. But now there was something scrawled underneath it in fresh black ink. Remember? Before remembering erases you. I tore it down and stuffed it in my pocket. My hands wouldn't stop shaking at the diner. The bell over the door jingled exactly the same way it had before. Maggie smiled at me like we'd never met. The same empty-eyed man read the same blank newspaper in the corner. My coffee came before I ordered. Deja vu layered over itself like broken film. I needed answers. When Maggie turned away, I leaned toward her. Hey, do you ever feel like you've lived this day before? She paused, mid-pour, frowned slightly. What do you mean? Just doesn't this all feel familiar? Her hand tightened on the coffee pot. You should finish up and get some rest. The fog rolls in early this time of year. Same line, same warning. I left without finishing breakfast. Outside, the air had grown heavy again, the sky paling toward that same ghostly gray. I headed for the post office. Maybe that was the key. Maybe Elian Tor, whatever was left of him, had left something there for me inside. Everything was spotless this time. No dust, no cobwebs. The mail bags were arranged neatly. The clock on the wall ticked steadily at 11:47 a.m. On the counter sat a stack of fresh envelopes, each stamped tomorrow. Hand on the desk lay a typewriter, still warm. A single sheet of paper sat in it, halfway typed, greater than to the one who keeps coming back. Stop trying to leave. You can't, but you can still choose what to forget. The ribbon clicked once, as if invisible fingers were still pressing the keys. I whispered, Elliot. Nothing. Only the ticking clock. I looked through the mailbags again. Most of the letters were addressed to people I'd already met. Maggie Hill, Mrs. Lynn Harris, Deputy Frank Keene. But there was one with my name. When I tore it open, I found only a photograph. It showed me standing on the main road at night, staring up at the sky. In the photo, the fog looked alive, tendrils reaching down, wrapping around my body. The back of the photo said, Second reset loop, stable. I staggered backward, knocking over a chair. My breath came short. What did second reset mean? How many times had this already happened? I ran outside. The streets were empty again. The light had changed darker now, even though it wasn't late. I saw a motion in the fog at the edge of town, figures walking slowly, outlines blurring like half-developed film. Voices murmured softly, distant and sad. I called out, "Elliot." For a moment, I thought I heard a reply, a whisper carried by the wind. "You are the letter now." The words sent a chill through me. I turned and sprinted toward the motel. The door to my room was wide open. Inside, every wall was covered with photographs, hundreds of them taped in neat rows. Every picture was of me, standing in different parts of Bridgetown. The library, the church, the diner, the post office. Always the same posture, always staring into the fog in the center of the room. A single phrase was written over and over again on the wallpaper. The writer becomes the story. The head spun. I fell to my knees, pressing my hands against my temples as flashes tore through my mind, memories that weren't mine, delivering mail, smiling at neighbors, writing letters long into the night. I saw myself wearing that same navy cap. I saw Maggie handing me coffee, calling me Mr. Crane. That couldn't be true. But the more I tried to push the images away, the more they dug in, rewriting me from the inside out. Then the doorknob turned. I looked up. Elliot Crane stood, the roar, what was left of him. His body shimmered, edges fading, but his eyes were real and full of sorrow. "You're almost out of time," he said, quietly. "The loop needs someone to remember. That's how it survives." I whispered, "You mean it's using us?" He nodded. "It used me first. Now it's choosing you." "I won't let it," I said. "I'll break it." He smiled faintly. "That's what I said once." He stepped closer. "When the sun sets, you'll start to forget. And when you wake, you'll write the letters. That's how it keeps itself alive." I shook my head violently. "No, there has to be another way." "There is," he said, "but it means burning the letters, all of them. Every record, every memory. If you do that, the town dies, and so will everyone in it." His voice trembled, including me. I didn't answer. Could I really erase an entire town? Were they even real anymore? He looked at me one last time, then placed a single envelope in my hand. "This is your final delivery," he said. "When the fog comes, decide who you want to be, the writer or the story." And before I could speak, he dissolved into mist. Outside, thunder rumbled far away. The first threads of fog began to crawl down the hills again. I clutched the envelope tightly, my mind spinning with the impossible choice. Either destroy the letters and end the cycle forever, or surrender. Let the loop rewrite me, become the next Elliot Crane. The wind carried a faint whisper through the empty streets. Tomorrow begins again. The envelope felt impossibly heavy in my hands. I didn't open it immediately. I just stood there, letting the fog curl around the motel windows like living fingers. Outside, the town was quiet, but the silence wasn't empty, was aware. I could feel the streets watching, waiting for my choice. I sat down on the edge of the bed, trying to steady my racing thoughts. The words Elliot had whispered before dissolving into mist echoed in my head. When the fog comes, decide who you want to be, the writer or the story. The thought of becoming the story, of being trapped in this loop forever, made my stomach turn. Every instinct told me to destroy the letters, burn every piece of evidence, and end whatever nightmare this town had become. But another voice, quiet and desperate, whispered caution. What if destroying them erased the people entirely? What if, in trying to free myself, I ended them? I picked up the envelope. The paper was thick and worn, like it had been handled countless times. Yet it was clean, pristine, perfect. My fingers traced the cursive on the front. My own name. I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No photograph this time. Just words typed in Elliot's unmistakable hand. Greater than the choice is yours. Save yourself. Or save us. Once the letters are gone, there is no return. the loop dies. And so do we. The fog will rise soon. Decide before the sun sets. Sat there, the envelope trembling in my hands. Outside, the fog had thickened, crawling along the streets like smoke spilling from a burning building. I could hear muffled voices through it, whispers, laughter, arguments, snippets of lives being lived over and over, never remembered, never changing. I thought about Maggie, the waitress, about the little girl with the red balloon, about the elderly librarian who had glanced at me with knowing eyes. All of them trapped, repeating days that weren't theirs, living lives dictated by a man who was no longer alive, yet somehow still present. I could feel the weight of responsibility pressing down, dragging at my chest. This wasn't just about me anymore. Every choice I made here would ripple through this town like a stone thrown into a pond, racing, reshaping or preserving what had been trapped for decades. The fog pressed closer to the motel, and I realized that time had nearly run out. My hands were shaking as I placed the envelope back on the bed. Slowly, deliberately, I knew what I had to do. I grabbed a lighter from the drawer and then hesitated. My heart thumped violently. A part of me screamed to stop, to leave, to forget this entire place and let the cycle continue. But another part, the part that had come to Bridgetown seeking truth, pushed me forward. One by one, I pulled letters from the stack in the post office, from the library boxes, from the motel room. Each one bore the same looping handwriting, each one a thread holding a memory in place. The letters weren't just paper. They were the town's lifeblood, a fragile tether connecting everyone to the man who had refused to forget. I set the first letter on fire. The flame swallowed it instantly. I watched as the ink curled, blackened, and disappeared. My stomach clenched at the thought of what I was doing, but I kept going. Letter after letter, photograph after photograph. Each flame illuminated the shadows in the room, dancing against the walls like ghosts rising from ashes. Outside, the fog churned, twisting violently as if resisting. A gust of wind blew through the broken window, scattering ashes across the floor. I could hear shouting voices now, muffled and panicked, echoing through the streets. It was as if the town itself was protesting, struggling against the inevitable. Then, at last, I was left with one final envelope. My name, my story, my life intertwined with theirs. I held it tightly, tears blurring my vision, and then I let it go into the flame. The fire hissed as the paper ignited, and I felt the room shake. The walls trembled. A deafening silence followed, and then a soft, almost imperceptible sigh, like the breath of the world itself letting go. Outside, the fog began to lift, slowly, revealing the streets bathed in a warm, soft light. The air smelled clean, like rain on dry earth. Birds chirped again, but this time their songs sounded unburdened, free. I stepped outside. The streets of Bridgetown were empty, but not lifeless. The houses stood quietly, doors and windows intact. There was no trace of the figures I had seen, no whispers, no echoes. The town felt peaceful, and yet there was an eerie stillness that suggested everyone, somewhere, had vanished into memory. I walked to the diner. Maggie's was dark and empty. I stepped inside. No coffee brewing, no waitress, no faint smiles or small talk, only silence. The post office was locked. The letters gone. The typewriter was gone. Even the photograph of me and Elliot in 1984 had vanished. I realized, finally, what I had done. Bridgetown no longer existed in the way it had before. The loop was broken. The townspeople, their lives, their memories, their repeated days had all been erased. The place was silent, abandoned to the quiet flow of time, and I was alone. For the first time in Bridgetown, I could remember everything clearly. I was free, but at a cost I would never fully understand. I had saved myself. I had destroyed the loop. I had erased a town from existence, I walked down Main Street, stepping carefully over the cracks in the pavement, listening to the distant wind through the trees. Somewhere far away, I thought I heard a soft whisper, a faint echo of a voice I had known, but it was gone in the next second. The sun rose higher, warming the streets. The fog had disappeared entirely, leaving only the golden light of an ordinary morning. I looked back once, at the motel, at the silent diner, at the empty post office. A shiver ran down my spine. I could feel the weight of the letters, the lives they had held, lingering in my chest. And then I walked away. The road ahead stretched wide and empty. I didn't look back again. Bridgetown was gone. The town that forgot tomorrow had finally been forgotten forever. But as I drove away, I felt the faintest sense that I was carrying something with me, a memory, a responsibility, a whisper of the lives I had erased. And somewhere deep inside, I knew that even though the town was gone, the story would never truly leave me. The road stretched endlessly before me, sunlight bouncing off the asphalt like it was trying to warn me, or maybe guide me. I hadn't spoken to anyone in hours, but the silence wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, full of ghosts I couldn't see. My hands gripped the steering wheel as though letting go would make everything I had done unravel. For the first time since arriving in Bridgetown, I felt the weight of absolute choice. No loops, no letters, no whispers, just me, alone, in the memories of lives that had never truly existed outside of that cursed town. I tried to think logically, tried to reason with myself. Did I do the right thing? Could there even be a right thing when the cost was an entire town's existence? I kept replaying Elliot's words over and over. Once the letters are gone, there is no return. The loop dies, and so do we. I knew what he meant now. Those letters weren't just reminders, they were tethers, threads holding a community in place, fragile as spider silk, strong enough to survive decades. I had snapped them. I had severed everything. The first town I passed after leaving Bridgetown looked normal. Families were walking dogs. People waved at one another. Shops were open. Cars moved freely. But even as I watched, I realized the world felt different, like the air itself had shifted. My senses were sharper, the colors brighter, almost painfully vivid. I stopped at a gas station to fill up, the attendant looking at me curiously. "Traveling far?" he asked. I nodded. "Yeah, a long way." His eyes lingered on me, and I could swear he knew something I didn't. He didn't say it though. Maybe he couldn't. Maybe no one could understand what happened in Bridgetown unless they'd been there themselves. I checked the envelope again. It was empty now. Nothing left but a faint smell of smoke. My hands shook slightly, but I didn't put it down. I think part of me hoped it would speak again, offer guidance, some small comfort in a reality suddenly too vast to grasp. Driving through the countryside, I realized the quiet wasn't just absence, it was the echo of what I had destroyed. I could hear it in the wind, in the rustling of trees, in the hum of the tires on the asphalt. It was soft, almost mournful, like a lullaby sung backward, fading into oblivion. At night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in my motel bed at the next town, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything that had happened. Every letter, every photograph, every glimpse of the fog, the post office, the little girl with the balloon. I remembered the librarian's knowing eyes, Maggie's cautious smiles, every resident's blank stare. They were gone, and yet I could still feel them around me. I started writing, not articles, not notes letters, thousands of words pouring onto paper, as if committing to memory everything I had seen, everything I had felt. Perhaps it was my way of holding on to Bridgetown without letting it trap me again. Perhaps it was my own loop, a personal tether to a town that had ceased to exist. Days passed, weeks. I moved from town to town, city to city, always looking for signs of life, for hints that the world I knew had changed. But the fog never returned. The letters never appeared again. Everything was normal, painfully normal. And yet, every time I closed my eyes, I saw Bridgetown, the streets, the mist, Elliot's eyes. I realized something terrifying. Memory doesn't belong entirely to the living. Some things linger, some things persist, long after the world has moved on. And maybe that was why I was still haunted. Maybe destroying the letters didn't erase Bridgetown from existence, just erased it from the physical world. Its memory clung to me. On a quiet night, I dreamt I was back there. The fog thick, the streets empty, letters scattered across the pavement like fallen leaves. I heard Elliot's voice whisper again, "Greater than the writer becomes the story." I woke up gasping. The sunlight through the window felt warmer than usual. I touched the envelope, still resting beside me. Empty, cold, silent. I realized then that freedom has a cost. Memory carries responsibility. And even when you escape, even when the loop is broken, the echoes of choice remain. I drove on. The world seemed larger now, freer, but infinitely lonelier. I would never speak of Bridgetown, not to friends, not to strangers, not even in casual conversation. To do so would be to invite the fog back, to risk the loop, attempting to rebuild itself in the shadows of my mind. And yet, I kept writing, every day, not to warn anyone, not to preserve the town, but to remember, for myself, the lives I had erased. Each sentence, each word, a tether to the memories that weren't mine, but which had become a part of me. Months later, I returned to the countryside, passing through towns and highways that might have existed before, but nothing was Bridgetown. No post office, no diner, no letters, no fog, only the open sky stretching endlessly, and the knowledge that I carried what remained of a town that had forgotten tomorrow. Some nights, I can still see Elliot standing in the mist, holding the letters, waiting, not to punish me, not to guide me, but to remind me that memory itself is a kind of responsibility. That choice has consequences, and that even in freedom, we remain bound to the stories we survive. I no longer fear the fog. I no longer chase the loop. I only live with the memory of what I did and with the weight of the lives I couldn't save. Bridgetown is gone. And yet, in my mind, every street, every whisper, every fleeting smile continues to exist because memory doesn't die. And sometimes, I swear, when the wind blows just right, I can hear the faint rustle of letters, carried somewhere beyond the edge of the world, whispering, "Greater than tomorrow begins again." The echoes of memory toned, reflective, suspenseful, slightly eerie. The narrator travels across different towns and cities in the United States, documenting landscapes in human life. Although everything seems normal, subtle anomalies occur. Street signs appear twice, distant, fog-like haze at sunset. Fleeting glimpses of people who look like Bridgetown's residents. The narrator receives anonymous letters in the mail, typed with the same looping cursive of Elliot Crane. Some contain warnings, others memories of townspeople, suggesting fragments of Bridgetown's loop survived elsewhere. Internal conflict deepens. Should they destroy these remnants too? Are they still responsible for the echoes? The narrator's sleep becomes troubled with vivid dreams where the fog returns. Letters fly across empty streets, and Elliot appears, urging reflection rather than action. Ends with the narrator realizing that memory itself can be contagious. The town may be gone, but the story persists through anyone who remembers it. Legacy and the writer's choice stone. Philosophical, emotional, suspenseful, bittersweet. The narrator returns home, setting up a small office or study to write their story of Bridgetown. Every word feels heavy, like carrying the town in their mind. They publish or record the story for others, YouTube, journal, or letters, but never reveal the truth entirely. Small hints of Bridgetown's existence are left for attentive readers or viewers as they write. Subtle phenomena hint that fragments of the loop might still exist. A letter appears on the desk. Fog curls just outside the window, or shadows move unnaturally. The narrator realizes the ethical paradox by telling the story. They risk reigniting parts of the loop, but by not telling it, the town's memory is truly lost forever. Climactic reflection. The narrator accepts their role as the keeper of memory. They are the writer, and through storytelling, they preserve what was lost. Ends with an open, haunting line, a whisper carried by wind or rustling paper. Tomorrow begins again, leaving viewers with lingering suspense and curiosity for future extensions. The last letter I never thought I'd stop traveling. After Bridgetown, after the fog, after the letters in the loop, I kept moving, chasing normalcy, chasing distance, chasing quiet. But quiet never lasted. Even when the towns were ordinary, even when the streets were filled with laughter and light, I could feel Bridgetown lingering in the air like dust. It started with small things. A flicker of movement at the corner of my vision. A faint scent of smoke when there was none. Shadows that shifted unnaturally. And then, letters. At first, I thought it was my imagination, an old habit of looking for them. But then I received a single envelope in the mail. No return address, no stamp. Just my name, written in perfect looping cursive. I tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper, greater than. Memory is not linear. Stories survive when lives cannot. You carry us now. Do not forget EC. I stared at the words for a long time, my hands trembling. The penmanship was exactly Elliot's. The ink smelled faintly of smoke and old parchment. I wanted to throw it away, to destroy it, to finally rid myself of the weight Bridgetown had left on me. But I couldn't. Not yet. I spent the next few days walking through the streets of a sleepy town, writing what I remembered. The houses, the fog, the letters, the people, Elliot Crane, the little girl, Maggie, the librarian. Every moment I had witnessed, every echo of repetition, every detail of the town's life before I destroyed it. Each word felt like a lifeline to a world that no longer existed. I realized then that even if the town had vanished, its memory would survive through storytelling. My memory had become the vessel. At night, I dreamt of the fog again. But this time, it didn't terrify me. It drifted over the streets softly, like a river flowing gently past. I could see the townspeople, no longer blank-eyed, no longer trapped. They were smiling, walking freely, fading in and out like light through water. I woke each morning with a sense of quiet purpose. I kept writing, not for fame, not for recognition, but because it was the only way to honor what had existed, because memory itself is sacred. Years passed. I continued to travel, continued to write. Each letter, each story, each recollection became part of a larger tapestry, woven into books, recordings, journals. Each one carried a whisper of Bridgetown, ensuring it would not be forgotten. In one evening, as the sun dipped low behind a line of distant hills, I felt the faintest rustle of paper at my feet. I looked down. A single envelope, fresh, bearing no postmark, lay on the ground. I picked it up slowly. Greater than you have remembered well. The town lives in you, and through you, we endure. E.C. I smiled softly, tears sliding down my cheeks. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in my coat pocket. For the first time since Bridgetown, I felt complete. Not free from memory, not free from the burden, but connected, carrying a world that no longer existed in reality, yet thrived in remembrance. I walked forward into the twilight, the horizon stretching endlessly before me. The wind carried a faint, comforting whisper. Greater than tomorrow begins again. And I knew, finally, that in memory, in story, in choice, some things never truly end. Bridgetown was gone, but its heart, the letters, the people, the echoes lived on through me, and through that, it would survive forever. I kept walking, and I kept writing, because some stories are too important to be forgotten.